my background is, of course, pedagogy and education, but my big interest is in technology enhanced learning, particularly pedagogical aspects in this field. What should be done, how should be done, and we are working quite seriously on that field. We also are opening a new study program from September this year, which will be devoted to educational technologies. The title for this new program is Educational Technologies and Design, and design is meaning on technology design. So we have a lot of to say, but I will try to keep short in 20 minutes this presentation. So let's start about students. So the first and some kind of rhetoric question is, can we reconnect students or should we reconnect them? And our answer is that of course not, and this not only because of COVID, that we are all switching to digital learning, but also because of development of technologies, development of new solutions which can be used for educational purposes. So let's start about the presentation, what I will aim, what is technology enhanced learning and dimensions of that learning and dimensions of smart pedagogy. And smart pedagogy, it's a concept for technology enhanced learning. And to start, I will address, I will start with a reference to Kirkwood and Price, who said that concept of technology enhanced learning is mostly associated with the technologies itself rather than enhancement of the learning process to ensure that the learning goals are met. And this is really a problem for educators. What we are assuming from about technology enhanced learning that we move from ICT-based learning to technology-enhanced learning. And technology environments need to be flexible to accommodate single users, small groups, whole classes, or specific categories of students. And it can be students with special needs, it can be students who are interested in particular subject, and so on. And technology-enhanced learning means that technologies, technological solutions, digital learning materials, digital content, and so on are used for learning purposes to support learning, to learn new competencies, to become creators of innovative solutions, because what problem we have indicated, let's say, is that a lot of competencies are developed to use these technologies, but not so good competencies are in creating materials, creating new content. So our purpose is to use technologies in pedagogically correct way and mix together technology-enhanced learning, blended learning, and flipped classrooms to develop these learning spaces. And the idea, what I think could go wrong, it's first one is fascination of technologies. And those who are working in educational field also are familiar with that concept that this fascination is not always bringing new knowledge and not always developing, because fascination can be on short-term effect. And other issue which should be taken in mind, that keeping away from technologies also not is the answer from the age of the times where technologies are developing and progressing, and schools keep to try to keep away from technologies. There is also ideas which are not expressed here in European part. Mostly it comes from Asia, that teachers are not needed anymore because everyone can find the information and learn by himself. which is, we know that it's not true because teachers should lead these processes. There is also some ideas that self-regulated learning can happen because everyone can be the teacher for himself, because information can be found, everything can be done, but latest research shows that this self-regulated learning doesn't work so well if there is no pedagogical support in that process. And next one is that the global expectations for ICTs and their role in promoting self-regulated learning were really hopeful, and first ideas raised in years already quite a long time ago, 80s, previous century 80s. And it was proved that it's not working in that way. So what was forgotten? Motivation to learn. And motivation to learn are a lot of the dimensions in this motivation. We have to support, we have to give feedback, we have to say, or we have to let students feel that something is done. But if process is based on fascination effect, it's a short-term effect, and it's not always working in sake of motivation. Then principles of self-regulated learning, educational technologies can help, but they can not replace pedagogical work, of course not in old understanding of pedagogical work, but in a new understanding that teachers are those who are putting all these things together. Learning sequence, starting from simple knowledge going to abstract knowledge to metacognition. Principles of attention also should be taken in mind because of also again this concept of fascination, because if we put our attention to some fascinating effects of technologies, we are supporting development of short-term attention, but to learn something we have to analyze data, we have to analyze information which we already have in our memory, but if it's only based on this short-term fascination effects, it can't be influenced, it can be supported learning in development of metacognitive processes. So in some researches, also I can mention here OECD researches which says that there are lower learning outcomes in technology-enhanced learning environment, but it's in traditional understanding of learning outcomes. But we have to think about these research results from different perspective, because they are measuring learning outcomes from traditional perspective, and we have to develop new research methodologies and to indicate what is developed and what different approaches can be used to measure competencies. And there are, I think you are also faced with this information which is quite overwhelming, that millennials are not prepared for life, and which is not true, of course, but we have to give the pedagogical answer for that. As a conclusion on that is that everything is not correct, and so we have to stop introvert new things. So that's not the right way to keep away from technologies. It's our understanding to. But next one is about new rules. In my opinion, new rules for using technologies without proactive actions are useless. And one example which I would mention here is, for example, you all know that it's forbidden to use Facebook. It differs in different countries. In some countries it's allowed from 14 years, in some countries from 16. And as we all know that children are not developing because of age. So it's like naive understandings that in age 14 they will become competent users of social media. So that is why I'm saying that we have to develop this understanding how to use social media, how to use digital technologies, not from particular age, but starting from early years, and support the development of understanding. And there is also a big movement of researches which says that small kids are influenced from screen time, and of course a lot of screen time is not developing, but it's not the answer on challenges raised by the digital learning materials. So I divide digital learning materials in 4 groups. So these can be learning materials that help to acquire certain knowledge, skills, competencies using digital or technological solutions, and it can be wide range of different solutions. And as we spoken previously, the technology enhanced learning means that we use these tools and technologies to develop some knowledge starting from lower understanding and going to metacognition. Next one, learning materials which are used in forms which are not previously used. For example, books which are merged together with digital technologies, where we can use book which looks like similar book, but this coded with, let's say, augmented reality or digital pen, which turns this book in different way of learning material. Next one is freely available content which can be transferred to learning material, also available for us, and learning materials to be used for learning content which otherwise would not be available. And here I think about, for example, virtual solutions, which can help us to understand concepts or to be in places which are not available for different reasons. For example, we can be in places which are not available anymore because of historical events, or maybe it's dangerous to be there, or maybe it's not possible, technically not possible to be there. So we have different kind of these solutions which can be used for educational processes. Risks which we have also distinguished, that sometimes when we speak about technology enhanced learning, then constructivism and constructionism narrowed down into a technological determinism paradigm. So where again technologies goes in front, forgetting about learning logic. Easy access to information is not providing the cognitive load and vice versa. Cognitive load can lead to avoidance motivation. I will explain later about that idea. And fascination effect without seeing the whole picture. Of course, we sometimes forget about special needs. And for example, COVID situation showed us that of course we can switch to online learning mode, but are we ready to support all kind of special needs students in that online learning space? So, and of course, classroom management issues, which in online space also a big topic, because I don't know how it happens in your universities, but in our university we discovered new problems which are not traditional classroom management problems, but which are online classroom management problems, let's say so. For example, switching on screen, but not being present in this lecture, doing some other things, and or plagiarism is also a problem in that situation. So here is my idea about challenges for cognitive development. Let's start. You see the picture, and I will try to explain how it should be read. So if technology is used to switch the attention away from solution of the problem, and it can be done, we all know that it can be done, then cognitive development can be hindered. But if technology is used to find the solution of the problem, cognitive processes develop. So we can't say that we are in one or in another side. It's our task to see how technologies are used and how these technologies are supporting learning process. And if we are doing something not correctly, let's say, we of course can influence the development of cognitive processes, and we can switch it in positive outcomes. What should be done? Switch the educational field to innovative pedagogy, which means to develop understanding of motivation, to develop ways of feedback on technology-enhanced environment, which should be different. Let's say a simple example of motivation, if we are meeting students face-to-face, we, almost all of us, I suppose, know how to motivate students, how to give the feedback, but it's quite different in online space and behind the screens or on online courses, and it's different issues. Teaching and learning need to change to reflect more optional pedagogical, didactical, organizational, managerial, and systematic aspects than are presently in use. And what does it mean? Change the focus and accept the role of pedagogy. But pedagogy, in my understanding, a bit different. This in a digital environment, it's I call it smart pedagogy. Change the way how the teachers are prepared. I know countries where teachers are well prepared to use digital technologies in classrooms, but still we have to do more in that aspect because there is a lot of teaching on technologies for those countries who do that, on technologies which are in market right now, but most importantly, I think, is to develop new competencies for students, how to live in this technology-enhanced environment, and develop new research strategies, which also a big topic. The dimensions of technology-enhanced learning, learning outcomes, and this one I'm putting together like a cube where all dimensions are in different aspects. So teacher digital and pedagogical competence, students digital competence. I suppose that every one of you have heard this term that students are digital natives, which are not true, of course, but this term is quite lively in our environment. Digital learning materials should be developed, and of course all digital ICT solutions and digital environment. So if we speak about this cube, it's also should be developed in smaller components, and it goes like every dimension can be developed. This one, I suppose every one of you knows this Bloom's taxonomy revised by Anderson and colleagues, but the idea is that learning always comes from the factual knowledge, and we have to remember that we have to reach this metacognitive knowledge also in digital environment. Also there we have to understand how to develop students' ability to create new things, to develop new content, to develop new knowledge. And so here I reference again to this cube, which I showed previously. For example, if we look on one side on teachers' digital competence, the aspects are teachers have the knowledge of content they have to teach. Teachers know the learning taxonomies and learning stages. Teachers are aware of development of motivation, positive attitude to learning, development of social skills. Teachers know how to assess the learning outcomes, but teachers assume that students are digital natives. Sometimes it's really true, and it should be forgotten, because students have to be taught how to use these tools, because they are not aware. They can understand how to go to Facebook, how to use Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, or whatever, but how to use these tools for learning, it's not familiar for them. Teachers are not aware about all the possibilities of digital learning. I just mentioned some of them: podcasts, online learning materials, videos which can be developed, augmented reality applications, and so on. And teachers are not prepared for the assessment of learning outcomes in digital world. Again, I would put the stress here that it's not goes to all the teachers, but it's a common problem. And for example, how we would evaluate this result of student who has developed from Arduino scratch, developed some kind of robotic solution. So it goes that way we put all together. Students' digital competence to use all this hardware, to learn, to develop new content, to overcome difficulties. And if the motivation to learn is not developed, they can switch their attention to new fascination products, fascinating information, but not overcoming this. The digital competence is overrated, and there is no content to learn in a way how young people wish to learn, and there is no pedagogical support in most cases. Digital learning materials, a lot of possibilities, a lot of products, a lot of new information. And if you look in Voldomet, there is such a space where you can look for statistic information, worldwide statistic information. You can see there that expenditures on education technologies are rising every day. But most of these materials, these are businesses, and they are not always well developed for learning situations, because these materials are developed by ICT experts, but not experts in pedagogy, and it causes a problem in learning logic. Not always, but sometimes it's a case. And the products are not developed with intuitive logic, and it keeps students away from them. Again, I should stress it out that it's not always the case, but it's very often the case. Last research which was done was on virtual museums, and it was very interesting results to see that it's very fascinating products, very interesting to use it. But if we look on these products from pedagogical perspective, from learning perspective, a lot of them are useless for learning. So smart pedagogy as a framework for learning in technology environment, I will skip it. And this smart idea comes from IBM, it comes from Apple. You will see the presentation later on. And of course, it goes just translations that smart, it goes smart students, smart teachers. And there is one example of possible risks, or if technologies are not incorporated in teaching process with pedagogical support, with understanding how to use it, because it's interesting for students. Of course, it's interesting. And they put their attention to technologies, and this development of cognitive processes can be hindered, as I showed in that picture previously. And that's why we have to put it together. So if there is a stimulation of interest all the time, it supports development of short-term attention. It influences ability to analyze information. And because the capacity of the memory is weak, and it develops avoidance motivation because of learning. Learning is hard if you don't understand the information which is coming, which you are facing in some situations. And avoidance motivation, it's sometimes called handicap motivation, sometimes it's called also different names, but already years ago it was developed, this concept. So idea is that technology should be inserted in learning process everywhere where it's possible, but in pedagogically correct way to keep balance. And because learning can't happen if you don't learn. And here is just synapses in pictures. So you have to learn something. And here goes the concept of smart pedagogy altogether. There is
1 minute left.
Yeah, I know. I'm coming to end. It's big concept behind it. I have developed this one, but most idea is that when you are using technologies, you have to look on big whales, let's say. We have to look on human development issues. We have to look on technological progress, and we have to be aware educational taxonomy or educational learning logic. And also, I put on the bottom predictive analytical competence, which is very important, because if we are using new technologies, which are new, and we haven't done long-term researches on that, it's somehow doing things which are not predicted yet, which are not researched yet, and we have to predict how the outcomes will be from these situations. So in evaluation of materials, educational processes, the main question shouldn't be, is it interesting? But main, is it developing? Is the situation, is the use of different technologies, learning materials developing? So I will finish with a sentence from Oren Harari, which you maybe know very well, that electric light didn't come from the continuous improvement of candles. And so thank you for your